How do you get hazard pay, and how do you calculate hazard pay under a second stimulus package? Hey everybody, this is LALATE with a second stimulus check and stimulus package update for today. Our second of 5. This one's about hazard pay. That $10,000 lump sum which could land in your bank account if you were an essential worker who worked during the pandemic. We've been detailing hazard pay all week long. It's always our second of 5 second stimulus check videos per day. This video is going to go over 3 questions. How do you get the hazard pay? How do you calculate the hazard pay? And how do you actually receive the hazard pay? Let's recap. The HEROES Act, which is currently in the Senate, was passed by the House. It was passed by Democrats. And it called for a provision called the HEROES Fund. The HEROES Fund would pay people who worked during the pandemic as essential workers. Yesterday, what I did for you was I actually pulled pages from that bill and read the pages on air that defined who are the essential workers. What is important to understand is the following. First, the bill defines essential workers line by line by line over about 10 pages. So it does not say it's going to use state definitions of essential workers or county definitions of essential workers. The bill actually says it, as a bill, will tell you who were and are the essential workers. Next, even though I read that description on air, I received, 120 comments with people basically asking, am I an essential worker? Am I an essential worker? What I recommend you to do with every YouTube video, there's a button at the bottom of the screen that says CC, like Charles. Rewatch that video from yesterday and turn the CC button on so you can see when I go through each of those classifications. And you'll see when I get to yours, or if I don't get to yours, and you'll see the way it's phrased. Here is the takeaway. 1, if you don't hear your class of workers mentioned, you're not an essential worker. Don't hate the messenger. I'm only reporting the news. If you don't like the bill, contact your congressman. The situation is still very fluid. They love to hear your input. Their members of staff are still working, even though the senators and the congressmen are on vacation. So if you don't hear your category mentioned, contact the staff and say, hey, I want to have my class of workers included. Second, if you heard your class of workers included, then you're included. Finally, if you heard something and you weren't sure if that's enough, that would be aka the gray area. Here's my suggestion. My suggestion for you is check with your employer, former employer or whatnot, because ultimately it's not my say. It's not my say to interpret the language of the bill. If the bill is passed exactly as written, it is not me as your host to interpret the language. It's ultimately your employer. And if your employer says they read it and they don't think that applies, or they read and they say it does apply, then it is between you and your employer. If you're non-unionized, there's really no recourse to getting the situation done. Next, how do you get the hazard pay? This is my rant, my anger for you. As you know, what I just explained to you is the HEROES Act. It is one of several bills that would pay hazard pay to you. That one is badly written. If you don't like it, which I don't, contact your congressman right now. The reason why I don't like it, when I ask how do you get paid for hazard pay? 1, your employer would have to apply. You can't apply. 2, your employer would get the money from the federal government. 3, the employer would send the money to you. The way the HEROES bill is written, the employer does not have to do anything. It's quite horrible. It literally says the employer is not required to do anything and can simply just choose not to do it. I think that employers won't do it, and I'll tell you why. They have to do accounting. They have to do a lot of bookkeeping. They have to calculate every single worker, every single number of hours from August, if the bill is passed on August 8th, all the way back to January 1st, do all this bookkeeping, and no one in the federal government is paying them a penny under this plan to do that bookkeeping. Why would they do it? Simply because you tell them to do it? I don't think they're going to do it. Second, there's a lot of applications and requirements that they have to follow, and I just think it's not a very employer friendly provision. Now, the good news is that this is not the only hazard pay bill that is in the Congress. Mitt Romney's bill I detailed yesterday. It's totally different, and it's great. It is really well written. I applaud Senator Romney. I'll tell you why. One, it requires the employer to do it. It says the employer must do it. So hey, you're just listening like, wow, that works. They must do it for you. B, it says that the employer is given an incentive to do it for you. See, an employer is actually given a financial incentive from the federal government. They get compensated in a way. They get a benefit. I'm not going to go into the nuance of it because it's quite boring. But the employer gets a financial benefit to do it for you. So there's a reason why they should do it. Not only is it they're required to do it, but they're going to get compensated to do it for you. How do you calculate the hazard pay? So what I want you to do as the viewer of this channel, you can do this calculation yourself. I'm going to get to a caveat right away because I'm getting it every single day that I do hazard pay, and I mentioned the first video. I'm going to mention it every single video. The big problem with the hazard pay bill is people who are paid as 1099s or people who are paid by job and are not paid by hour. If you are not paid by hour or you're paid by 1099, it is a hot mess. Also, if you're an independent contractor, if you own your own business and you are an essential worker, if you listen to yesterday's video and you say, hey, I'm an essential worker, but the only problem is I'm self-employed. It's my own business and I do things on a job by job basis. I don't do it on an hourly basis. What happens? What happens is you need to contact your congressman's office right away because it is a mess. Truckers of this channel, cleaning people of this that watch this channel are paid sometimes per job. They're independent contractors. They're not paid by hour, and they qualify under the definition of essential workers under the bill, as I read yesterday. But what do they do? Do they apply for themselves? How do they calculate the hours? So what I want you to do, you know what I'm going to say? I didn't think about this ahead of time before I recorded this, but I'm going to say this right now. If you are one of the people I just talked about, if you are self-employed or you are you do things on the job basis, job by job. You don't do hourly. I want you to get a pen and paper out. If you are an essential worker, you watch yesterday's video and say, I'm an essential worker. I want you to get a pen and paper out and start calculating how many hours you think all those jobs took you. Because ultimately, that might be how this ends up. We don't know if it will, but it may end up that way. So if you're a trucker and you delivered something from Tennessee to Los Angeles and you got paid this amount of money, I want you to figure out how many hours that it took you to drive. And that might be the way they're going to fix this. All right. So everyone else that fortunately falls under the simplistic version of this bill, which is you're an essential worker and you were paid on the hourly and you worked between January and the present, then you need to do this. You need to get a pen and paper when you have some time and figure out how many hours you worked. I get this question a lot, so let me answer it right here. I don't care if it's a person you no longer work for, that they laid you off. I don't care if you had multiple essential worker jobs. So let's say you worked as a clerk at a supermarket, and let's say you also worked as a clerk at another supermarket. The same job at two different places. Those both count. Also, I got the question about overtime and regular hours. Overtime hours work. All hours. I don't care what it is, because that's the way the bill is written. So I want you to get a pen and paper out and figure out how many hours you worked from the first week of January. And, by the time the bill is finished, we'll see what week in January they're going to write it as. But let's do the first week of January all the way up to August 8th. Put that down and figure out how many hours. Take that number. So you got the number of hours. Take that number, multiply it by 13. That is the amount of money that you need to then look at. There's three things to think about. One, if that amount is over $10,000, stop. If the amount is under $5,000, okay. And if the amount is between $5,000 and $10,000, that's another scenario. What do you need to do? You need to think about how much you made in your 2019 earnings. If your 2019 earnings were over $100,000, you will only get up to $5,000 under the HEROES Act. So to recap, if you made over $100,000 last year for the job that the job that's at issue, then you will only get up to $5,000. So when you did that calculation for me a few minutes ago, if you came to, let's say, $3,000, and then let me do the other one. If you came to, let's say, $6,000, you're only going to get $5,000. If you only came to, let's say, $2,000 and you made over $100,000 a year, okay. The way the HEROES Act is written, you will continue to get $13 an hour for every hour you work after the bill is passed forward up to $5,000. So you'll just have to work a couple more weeks to get that $5,000 if you made over $100,000 last year. Okay? For people who made less than $100,000 per year, this is for you. You need to look at that number you calculated for me, how many hours you've worked so far times $13 an hour. If you're at $10,000 or more, stop. You're going to get a lump sum check of $10,000. If you're less than $10,000, you're only at, let's say, $7,000. Okay, then you will get a check for $7,000. You'll get a check for that amount, whatever it is, $7,000, $6,000. But going forward, when you get checks from your essential employer for your essential work, going forward, you will get $13 an hour on top of that. A question I got a lot, I think a few days ago, was, is this taxable? I do not show that it's taxable. So the $10,000 will be $10,000. The $13 an hour will be your $13 an hour. The employer has to pay payroll taxes on it, but the $13 is not diluted. It's not reduced. It doesn't turn into like $11 an hour. It is $13 an hour. There you go. You had 120 questions yesterday. I won't be able to get to all of them, but here's a few of them. Support by Shauna. I'm a little confused. Why would they have us work 760 hours to qualify? I worked January to March. I got shut down. I would have only worked 500 hours. No, that's not what I said. So I did not say you have to work $10,000 worth of hours to get $10,000. No. If you have only worked if you've only worked 20 hours since January to the present, you'll get a lump sum for those amount of hours. You just won't get a lump sum. You just won't get a check for $10,000. So let me recap. If you've only worked a certain number of, yesterday I did a calculation for you about how you would get $10,000. If you haven't worked that many hours since January to the present, no problem. You're just going to get checked for that. And then going forward, you're going to get $13 an hour until you get up to $10,000. Michael. So you said construction workers aren't considered essential. That's funny. I receive my work from my employer stating I'm an essential worker via our infrastructure of the U.S. Ultimately, it depends on the bill. So the bill is going to be the definition of essential workers. And I know that is a little bit confusing. Counties have definitions of essential workers. States have definitions of essential workers. The federal government has definitions of essential workers. That is not the way this bill is going to land. It's going to land on how it defines essential workers. Leanne, a lot of questions about security workers. Watch that. There's a lot of people asking about how about my job? How about my job? Um, Ultimately, watch the video from yesterday. If you hear your job mentioned, you're essential. If you don't hear your job mentioned, you're not essential. Don't hate me. Contact your congressman. If you hear something that sort of sounds like your job is covered, then it's going to be a battle between you and your employer. Your employer may read that language and say, I don't think so. You may read the language and you say, I think so. It doesn't matter what I say, so I don't want to give my opinion of the situation, because ultimately my opinion of the situation does not matter when it's not clearly written. Unicorn, how do we get our companies or employees to fill out our application for us? That's the problem. They don't, under the HEROES Act, they don't have to. It actually says they don't have to. Under the Romney plan, they have to. So let's hope that the bill gets changed and it requires them to apply for you. Paul Ryan, I have a pilot's license, but I don't transport anything. You would not qualify. Tammy, semi-truck mechanics and shop helpers have contacts with the public. Do they qualify? I did have shipping. I did have mechanics on aerospace. I don't remember what the video talked about. Mechanics for distribution. I don't think it did. I work in retail grocery. Yes, actually, grocery workers. And what was interesting about grocery workers is they were very clear. You work in the grocery store. It also covered farmers. So if you stock the shelves in the grocery store and you did so during the pandemic, thank you for doing so. You are going to get paid. I got to say, of all the people that are absolutely going to get paid, in my heart of hearts, in my prediction, and it's ultimately my prediction, I may be wrong, I think the people who are absolutely going to get paid are grocery workers and anything medical and anything shipping and distribution. I think those are the ones that are so inherently clear in this hazard pay bill. I think everything else may be a battleground. What if the hospital housed nurses for COVID? Yes, if Donna Espinoza, I'm sorry I'm not mentioning the people who are dropping the question. Donna Espinoza, what if the hospital housed nurses for COVID? So if you worked in a hospital and your hotel, I'm so sorry, if you worked in a hotel and the hotel housed people for COVID, yes, it actually said that. It actually said that in yesterday's item. State Department of Highway Workers allowed low, down, and dirty. Yes, that was listed. What about food services, including food trucks? A vet. I don't think the food truck that pulls on the curb and you go get a sandwich from. I don't think they're qualified. I don't think that was mentioned. If you are a food delivery truck, if you are a distributor of flour and a distributor of produce, yes, that was mentioned for Yvette Bates. Timothy, what about public safety officers and security guards detailing the public on a daily basis? Public security officers, yes, that was mentioned. I have a lot of comments about private security. Boy, listen to yesterday's video, but absolutely law enforcement, anything like civil, garbage collectors, public works officials or public works employees, absolutely. Kyle M. So is this food delivery people that get hazard pay, or are the restaurant workers included as well? You'd have to read it. Landscape workers considered essential workers? No, it did not have landscape. Mortuary business, Antonia Mendez, yes, absolutely, mortuary. Everything about mortuary. I had a lot of viewers in the mortuary business. I did not know that. Every single thing about mortuaries, whether it's cremation or casket. I'm not going to go into the details, but everything for mortuary was listed in there. If you have questions in today's video, drop them in the comments below. We may answer them tomorrow's recording. Coming up, PUA and rent assistance, and finally EIDL. As always, stay with LA for more.